Whether these actors took their roles too seriously or not seriously enough, the results are hilariously bad, and their scenes will live on forever, even if they'd rather us forget them. Ryan O'Neal's acting career essentially died with the release of Tough Guys Don't Dance, which features one of the most uncomfortable and badly acted reaction scenes ever caught on film. In the scene, O'Neal's Tim reads a letter from Isabella Rossellini's Madeline, a former lover who's writing to tell him that his wife is having an affair with her husband. Tim's response to all this?
Oh man! Oh God! Oh man! Oh God! Oh man! Oh God! Oh man!
To be fair, "Oh man, oh God" is such a terrible line of dialogue, not even an actor of Meryl Streep's caliber could make it work. But O'Neal's stiff, emotionless reading is so bad, it wouldn't even land him a bit part in a high school production of Annie. No wonder writer-director Norman Mailer eventually apologized for keeping the scene in the final print. Susan Sarandon had an opportunity to do great work in the DC film Blue Beetle. Unfortunately, she doesn't play her character Victoria with any nuance. She steamrolls through her scenes with nothing but the half-hearted, two-dimensional indifference of a bored, Oscar-winning actor cashing in on the superhero blockbuster trend. The only family Victoria has left is her niece, Jenny, the daughter of her long-disappeared brother, and the two loathe each other. When Victoria catches Jenny and takes her away on a helicopter from Pago Island, Sarandon falls into a ridiculously over-the-top villain monologue.
You're gonna side with that edge-keep trash over your own family?
It's as if Sarandon herself can't pretend well enough to believe this is reasonable after all of the animosity sparked between them throughout the movie. For obvious reasons, the casting of Russell Crowe in Les Miserables was an unwise choice from a musical standpoint. The role of Javert is written as one of the more notable vocal showcases in the musical, and the gladiator actor is not a particularly gifted singer. When Jean Valjean spares Javert's life, the inspector goes through a pretty immediate existential crisis as his whole life philosophy revolves around a code of retribution. Crowe does the best he can with the song, to such a degree that he seems to forget about his character going through an intense emotional upheaval.
There is no way to go home.
It's not easy to sing Javert's suicide, and it's not easy to portray a man about to kill himself, which means it's certainly not easy to do both simultaneously. Crowe likely tried his best, but his best is nonetheless undeniably distractingly terrible. Renee Zellweger stomped and yelled and yawled her way to an Academy Award for her insanely over-the-top performance in Anthony Minghella's Civil War tearjerker Cold Mountain. In one particularly bad monologue, Zellweger's character Ruby reacts to her abandoned father's sudden return by comparing war to the weather.
They call this war a cloud over the land, but they made the weather, and then they stand in the rain and say, "It's raining!"
So if the question ever comes up in conversation, you can tell someone, yes, it's indeed possible to win an Oscar for a bad performance. Spoiler alert, Sofia Coppola's performance in The Godfather Part 3 is unquestionably a disaster, as she ruined every scene she was in, and she was in a lot of them. Ultimately though, it's her character Mary's death scene that stands out as the most hilariously bad moment. Sure, it's great to see Mary finally, die, but it isn't exactly easy to watch. Seeing her drop to her knees then collapse onto the stairs is the equivalent of watching a tree fall in the woods.
Dad?
Coppola must have agreed. She pivoted to directing shortly after the film was released. Angelina Jolie's cadence as the fabled Olympias in Oliver Stone's laughable historic epic Alexander is ridiculous, especially since no one else around her adopted the same accent. But her contrived dialect is nothing compared to whatever was happening with Colin Farrell in the movie, and we're not just talking about his bad blonde dye job. In one scene, Farrell's Alexander confronts his mom, for some reason portrayed by Jolie even though she's just 1 year older than Farrell, about her involvement in his father's death, and all hell breaks loose. Between Farrell's close-up nostril flare game and arm-thrashing rage and Jolie's heinous accent, the scene is a masterclass in D-list-worthy acting taught by two A-listers.
Whatever is necessary.
Where have you lost your mind?
Battlefield Earth is yet another infamously terrible movie all around. It has a critical score of 3% on Rotten Tomatoes, and for good reason. The plot is incoherent, the set and costume design are gross and forgettable, and the acting is aimlessly weird. And Battlefield Earth is especially known for John Travolta's career-worst performance as Terl, a creepy, affected alien whose sadism is generic and only moderately productive. In one particular scene, Terl is prepared to accept accolades for his work as temporary chief of security for Earth, a planet considered to be a backwater assignment and an insult to his career. He receives his accolades, but to his disappointment, his position is made permanent.
Are you not aware that I graduated top of my class?
Travolta speaks with a weird accent that sounds like he might be trying to go for British but didn't want to put a lot of work into it, and his attempt to act out rage is cringeworthy at best. James Wan's aggressive self-promotion and devoted fans put him on the map with Birdemic, but that was just one stop in a career that had already produced two equally strange films that didn't find distribution until after Birdemic found infamy. Just as Birdemic borrowed the template of the Alfred Hitchcock classic The Birds, Replica puts a science fiction twist on the master of suspense's most beloved film, Vertigo. Both films' protagonists discover a woman who's near identical to their dead lover. Only while in Vertigo, the love interest posed as the dead woman for a con. In Replica, she's a literal clone. And instead of falling out of a church tower, she dies in a car crash, despite going about 2 miles an hour. But regardless of the irrelevant plot, we know we're in for a good time early on when our main protagonist first asks out a doctor named Evelyn.
This is Joe Thomas.
Look, Mr. Thomas, I'm extremely busy. I'm at work.
It's hard to be sure if the acting's really to blame here. Rob Hill writes in the Bad Movie Bible that the Vietnam-born Wen refused to let his actors correct the non-standard English in his screenplays. Whoever's to blame, beez-vee is an unforgettable flub that might just work its way into at least a few new vocabularies. Every trash fan eventually needs to learn the legend of Golan and Globus. During their tenure at Cannon Films, they produced some of the most bizarre and incoherent movies ever made: The Apple, Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo, Superman 4 The Quest for Peace, and dozens of others. Directed by Golan himself, Enter the Ninja was one of Cannon's biggest hits, inspiring 2 sequels and even more knockoffs. It features spaghetti western star Franco Nero slaughtering his way through the population of a major city to protect his friend's plantation in the Philippines from an evil land baron. The ninja's biggest kill also gets the biggest laugh when he finally catches up with his nemesis, who, in his final moments, seems to literally shrug off his death. Maybe there's a deep lesson here about accepting our own impending demise rather than spending our lives worrying about it. Or maybe it's just bad acting. Bolero is a true meeting of the minds between Golan and Globus and softcore power couple John and Bo Derek. The wobbly plot involves Bo Derek as a young heiress in the 20s living out her movie-inspired dreams of sleeping with sheiks and bullfighters. It's not until the movie's almost over that a story begins to take shape, when a bull gores Derek's matador lover right through the crotch, and she trains to take his place in the ring and reawaken his vitality in the bedroom. As to how she chooses to express it,
that thing is going to work. I guarantee you this.
There's probably no good way to deliver that line, but Derek certainly didn't find it. Good thing too, because her ridiculously chipper attitude makes the dialogue even more hilarious. In the documentary Electric Boogaloo, the wild untold story of Cannon Films, co-star Olivia Dabo can't get through that line without cracking up. Neither can we. With the legendary Tony Curtis leading the cast, you might not expect Star Games to show up on this list. Then again, it's also a direct-to-video kiddie sci-fi film from veteran schlock peddler Graydon Clark, with his own kids in the starring roles, so maybe it's not so surprising to see it here after all. Hunted by an interplanetary conqueror dressed in a pile of patchwork quilts whose face looks like a half-finished wasp's nest, lacy-collared Prince Kirk flees to Earth in a ship piloted by a holographic clown head. There he meets Brian, who's gotten lost in the woods on a family camping trip. While the two of them camp out in an abandoned brick shack, Kirk's space watch starts making Pac-Man noises, much to his delight.
Yeah.
Sadly, Star Games viewers are stuck watching this kind of nonsense in a movie that briefly promises a stop-motion dinosaur fighting a bear instead. Samurai Cop is a true classic of unintentional comedy, and the story behind it is at least as fascinating. The Bad Movie Bible relates how filming would often stop dead while director Amir Shervan chased down enough money to film the next scene. A lot of close-ups have a suspiciously similar backdrop because they were filmed in Shervan's office. And when it came time to dub in some of the dialogue, the book claims most of the cast lost interest and disappeared. This meant Shervan voiced half the characters himself, and he does his best work in the opening scene. After a parking lot punch-out between the movie's main villains, the Katanas, and a rival gang, a random disembodied voice offers some positivity to the situation.
Come on, let's get going. Move it.
You did it!
For some reason, the voice Shervan chose for this mysterious character is less intimidating gangster and more animal sidekick from a kiddie cartoon. When it hit theaters, The Love Guru was widely considered one of the worst movies to come along in some time. It was a shocking turn of events for Mike Myers and his career, the expectation having been that this film would hit the same level of popularity as Wayne's World and Austin Powers. But absolutely no one ever wanted to see the Guru Pitka again. Myers landed a Best Actor Razzie and effectively went into entertainment exile for the next decade or so. One scene in particular, where Pitka addresses a group of avid fans and followers, evokes the secondhand embarrassment that comes with attending open mic stand-up comedy. Myers garbles his way through a racist impression of a spiritual guru spouting uninspired nonsense. The train wreck, interspersed with scenes of Jessica Alba's character looking on with adoration, is nonsensical.
And that's the end of that one.
Mariska Hargitay.
It's not Alba's fault that it's impossible to believe any person could be charmed by Pitka, either in the universe of the film or as a viewer of the movie itself. She does the best that she can, but it's as if Myers is trying to portray a level of charisma completely in opposition to what the script requires. In the world of Highlander, there can only be one. Unfortunately for audiences, the actor that director Russell Mulcahy chose to play the one was Christopher Lambert. Not only is Lambert a limited talent, but he was also badly miscast in Highlander. The fact that his casting was even worse than Scottish actor Sean Connery playing a Spaniard is saying something.
I am Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramirez, Chief Metallurgist to King Charles V of Spain.
The character of Connor MacLeod is an immortal Scotsman born in the 16th century, and Lambert grew up mainly in Western Europe speaking French. His Highlander accent is one of the worst of all time, and Lambert seems incapable of capturing the gravitas that should come with being upwards of 500 years old.
You ever get over to New Jersey, Nash?
Not if I can help it.
You talk funny, Nash. Where are you from?
Lots of different places.
He acts like a teenage punk who got caught spray painting a patrol car, not like a deeply troubled, aged man dealing with massive existential events. Mariah Carey is a musician first and foremost, obviously, and while some musicians have made a beautiful transition from music to film, it's often the case that someone who has spent their entire adult life pursuing a career in singing doesn't quite have the skills needed to reach the same level of success in films in a fraction of the time. Carey's Billy and Max Beasley's Dice are both pretty ridiculous characters in the 2001 dud Glitter, and their big breakup moment feels half-hearted to say the least. The scene is meant to be intense, and yet one gets the sense that both actors had only just finished memorizing their lines moments before. Billy is supposed to be at her wit's end, but Carey can't even muster up a truly raised voice.
The superstar always comes first.
Look, don't blame me for your failure.
As is often the case with badly acted scenes, the performers are certainly not helped by a dreadfully written script, but it's hard to believe that Carey and Beasley would have been able to do better with better writing. Al Pacino is an Oscar-winning actor, but that doesn't mean everything he's ever done has been a slam-dunk performance. In The Devil's Advocate, Pacino stars opposite Keanu Reeves as his ruthless, high-powered boss-turned-father-turned-Satan. The Satan reveal comes as a shock to Keanu, but we're more surprised he didn't start clapping sarcastically after Pacino finishes his "I'm the devil" monologue. For some reason, despite the fact that Pacino has successfully infused nuance into dozens of morally corrupt characters throughout his career, he seems totally unable to do anything in this scene other than channel any and every Disney animated villain. What's more, his monologue is delivered in such a way that it feels like he didn't even bother to read it more than once beforehand. He reads his lines with Walken-esque randomly assigned emphasis and a sporadic tone.
Yeah, that's the last thing to go. That's the final hiding place. It's the final fig leaf.
There's plenty of overacting on this list, and there's plenty in Miami Connection too, but it also manages to include actors swinging too far the other way and bringing absolutely no emotion to scenes that demand a whole lot more. Taekwondo master Y.K. Kim's ill-fated foray into movie making stars him and his students as a bunch of adult orphans who live together and play in a bar band that sounds like it'd be more at home recording a kiddie show theme song. They run afoul of drug-dealing ninjas, leading to countless unintentionally hilarious scenes. But out of all the over-the-top zaniness, there's nothing quite as memorable as one of the hero's very under-the-top reaction to the bad guys preparing for the final showdown.
Oh, ninjas.
You'd think he sees this kind of thing every day, but in the bizarro fantasy world of Miami Connection, maybe he does. Some bad movies transcend mere badness to become artifacts of a strange parallel world. They're painful to watch, but you can't look away. That's certainly the case for Santa and the Ice Cream Bunny, created by the doomed Florida theme park Pirates World just before Disney World arrived and ran them out of business. The movie's evenly split between a growling, muttering Santa Claus trying to rescue his sleigh that's stuck in a couple inches of dry Florida sand, and the story he tells the local children. Depending on the copy, he tells one of two repackaged fairy tale adaptations, Jack and the Beanstalk or Thumbelina. Both of them are treasure troves of acting badness, with the entire cast of each one apparently reading their lines off cue cards one word at a time, dropping their emphasis at random while still staying creepily monotone.
Oh, nothing is working. Nothing.
Fun in Balloon Land was released in 1965 by Giant Parade Balloons Inc., but beyond that, there isn't much else known about it. And that's a shame because we have lots of questions. The first half or so is a series of dream sequences involving a kid in a warehouse full of balloons, and that has some bad acting in its own right. But it's nothing compared to the Parade Balloon Showcase featuring a woman off-screen commenting on the passing attractions. We're not sure who this woman is, but her surreal descriptions and even more surreal cadence are unforgettable.
I'm glad I'm not walking with you. Oh, you were too long. Too long.
We may not be totally sure what Fun in Balloon Land is, but we do know it's a unique trashterpiece all bad acting fans need to check out. While Ed Wood is dead and buried and Tommy Wiseau remains a one-hit wonder, bad movie lovers have had to look elsewhere for unforgettably strange actor-directors. Fortunately, Las Vegas architect Neil Breen's side job of amateur filmmaker has been a boon to bad movie lovers everywhere. His third film, Fateful Findings, is just the wildly unjustified ego trip trash fans love. It's tough to describe the plot, since it's got about 4 or 5 only vaguely related ones, but it's mostly about Breen's hacker character revealing that people in power cheat and lie, to the shock of those living under rocks everywhere. In one of the most loosely connected subplots, Breen's friend is killed by his wife, who stages his death as a suicide. Eventually, Breen discovers his friend's very lively corpse.
I can't believe you committed suicide. I cannot believe you committed suicide. How could you have done this? How could you have committed suicide?
His bored, flat reading is less appropriate for a man finding his best friend dead and more for a parent finding out their kid got a D on the math test.